Hello and welcome to the very first episode 0000 of the Supernatural First Watch podcast. Now, you might be wondering, First Watch, why is it not rewatch or watch or show podcast? Well, there's a ton of great and fantastic supernatural podcasts out there, but I thought I'd throw my hat into the ring. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly, and I am a self proclaimed sci fi geek nerd fantasy fan. Uh, a bit about me. I got introduced to Supernatural when it was actually first on. I was a fan of Dark Angel, in which Jensen Ackles was a recurring character. And I was also a fan of Gilmore Girls, in which the wonderful and fantastic Jared Padalecki was starring at the time as well. And Buffy was off the air. I was a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is a whole another story. So I grew up on science fiction, on monsters, on the things that go bump in the night, and all of the excitement therein. So I heard about Supernatural and thought, hey, that sounds like a really interesting show. And at the time, what was interesting to me as well was I actually knew who the lead actors were. So I said, okay, absolutely. I'm going to sit down and watch this show. And I remember being a little bit wary, not quite sure if I wanted to stick with it, but I figured, hey, you know what? I'll go and watch it. And I do recall I got
About 10 episodes in or so.
and heard that the show was getting canceled. This is around the time that the WB and UPN were doing negotiations to merge their networks, and the show was not exactly raking in the ratings. So officially, I had seen that the show was going to get canceled, and I thought, all right, well, I'm not going to keep watching. I had fallen behind on the episodes, and I decided I wasn't going to keep watching. And then the merger came through and the show got renewed, which I was a bit surprised about. But every time I kept thinking, oh, you know what? I think I should go and watch Supernatural. Everyone I know says I'd probably really like it. The show seemed to be on the verge of cancellation. First, there was the writer's strike, which many people believe that if the writer's strike had not been happening, Supernatural would not have gotten renewed. But as often happens when something like this occurs in Hollywood, the shows that might have gotten the axe get renewed simply because they have no programming in the pipeline. So I remember that one. I remember being in college and a good friend of mine I was a huge fan of Supernatural, going on and on about it, but saying, it should have ended a couple of years ago. It shouldn't have kept going. And I, at the time, did not even know that the show was still on the air. And then this past summer, I was doing a week-long staycation, hanging out on my couch, reading and doing puzzles. And I wanted some sort of background noise. And I kept thinking to myself, well, I'd love to rewatch old television shows. So I had just finished rewatching Dark Angel, of which Jensen Ackles is a recurring character. And I said, you know what? I remember thinking that Supernatural will be really good. The show is over now, but hey, it has 15 seasons. And from what I remember, it's a creature feature. It was very episodic at the time. So, of course, it would be a great thing to put on as background noise while I put together puzzles. So I started watching Supernatural for the very first time. And honestly, beyond the pilots and the one episode I had mentioned, I did not remember any of the show at all. And then I was going through it and I binged the entire show in about 4 or 5 months. Ironically enough, I did not actually finish it. So I loved it enough. I was like, you know what? I could so see myself wanting to rewatch this show. And I have a lot of experience with loving to rewatch shows on Netflix or Hulu or your streaming channel of choice, only to find out that they've lost the rights again. And suddenly the show that was there yesterday, you're in the middle of, and it's gone. I'm a huge fan of owned media. So one of my favorite things to do is to buy DVDs of the series I love to rewatch again and again. So I went looking for the Blu-rays of Supernatural, found some fantastic price and bought the entire series. So it's a little hard to binge watch 347 episodes of a show you've just seen in the space of 30 days to make sure all of your DVDs work before the return period ends. So instead, what I did was I went back through and I watched one episode per disc to make sure that the disc at least played until I caught up where I was, which was about season 12 at the time. And then I started watching episode by episode. And you know what? It's a lot to binge in a very short period of time. And I ran out of the 30 days and around the same time that I was at the last season. So I am calling this the Supernatural First Watch because it is almost the first time through for me. I have only seen every single episode once, and I'm going back through and diving deep and exploring all of the amazing things that we're going to get introduced to over the next 343 episodes, I believe. So it's the first watch because it is. I went through and I watched it once, and I don't know anyone who goes and decides to launch a podcast about a show that they at least haven't seen a few episodes and want to make sure they actually like it. So I have seen most of Supernatural at least once. However, I have not finished the series. So I do have the ability to do speculation and wondering about what's going to happen next because I don't necessarily remember every single episode. I am going to strive to make this as spoiler free as possible. That at least is my goal and my intention because I love being able to uncover and rediscover all the things you like about a show as you're exploring. So, again, the Supernatural First Watch podcast, it is a rewatch podcast. However, it's not going to be, hey, I can't wait until this happens or I can't wait until that happens. Instead, we're going to explore what's happened so far, the road so far, and what that might mean for the future. As I said, there's a ton of episodes. So stick with me for the next couple of years, folks. And I'm excited to dive into the Supernatural First Watch. So if you are brand new and just rediscovered this show on Netflix or on Hulu like I did, feel free to tag along and know that you will be spoiler free or as spoiler free as I can make it. Also, word of warning to those of you who love IMDb, like I do. Um, don't read the trivia as you go along. I'm a huge fan of reading trivia as I go along watching a show, even if I've seen it before. However, there are so many spoilers throughout the trivia section on IMDb, and they're not all at the end. It used to be spoilers got grouped at the end of the descriptions. However, for Supernatural at least, there are so many spoilers within the trivia items that they are sporadic and throughout the entire section. So instead, I will be including a section of interesting trivia points for each episode that we dive into from IMDb and other sources, but that is not uh, full of spoilers. All right. So, as I said, my name is Kimberly. By day, I am a marketing strategist, consultant, self employed coach who loves helping people transform their world by getting their message out and helping people build the life that they want. I work mostly with entrepreneurs. Uh, However, by night, by afternoon, by weekend, by whatever time I feel like it, I am a huge sci fi nerd, a huge fantasy binge watcher, pop culture fun person. There's a lot of things I don't watch. There's a lot of pop culture I'm completely lost on. But for the things I do like, I become a little bit obsessed and I become a little bit deep divey, know all the goodies. As I mentioned, I was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan introduced by my uncle. It was a whole ritual that we would do to sit down and watch the episodes, which is another reason why I got introduced to Supernatural because it was on the WB, even though Buffy did leave. And I'm a fan, right? I'm a fan of diving into media and pop culture and exploring how it actually works and impacts us. And with a show that ran for so many seasons, 15 seasons, folks, that's like unheard of nowadays, unless you're Grey's Anatomy. Um, for a show that ran so long and at the time was going through so many different changes in Hollywood and television as an industry, I'll also be speculating and exploring the differences in technology and how the storytelling changes as we get further into what people call prestige television. When Supernatural premiered in 2005, there were shows that were starting to get on the air with a little bit more of an arc format to it. However, the name of the game at the time was still, for the most part, episodic television. That meant you could tune in at any time and you did not need to keep going. And Supernatural definitely follows that format for the first couple of years. So I will also be exploring and analyzing how Supernatural changed as as the view of television changed and as how television got made and got explored changed. In fact, some of the trivia items I do recall from the early seasons, such as season 3 and 4, when the writer's strike was happening, were that Supernatural, once they reconfigured for online streaming, was actually a quite well watched show. It's just the companies and the execs at the time were still using older metrics of measuring how interesting shows were and how many people were watching. And that's an ever changing landscape. And at the time, streaming wasn't really added in properly. So when they went back and reconfigured the numbers, they actually found out it was one of the top rated shows. So there's a lot of interesting and exciting things to explore. I promise we're going to dive in the next episode to all of the goodies around Supernatural. But in the meantime, I would love to hear from you. What kinds of things do you want to explore? What kinds of things do you want to hear about? If you're brand new to the show, I would love to know how you got introduced and into your journey. And you can always email me at the email address in the show notes for the Supernatural First Watch podcast. I would love to hear from you, and you might even get featured on the show if you want. So, without further ado, go on over and head on over to the pilot episode where we dive into the very first episode, in which it's the one we meet the brothers Winchester. Until next time.
And I'll see you on the road in the pilot.